So, shall we start? So, where were we last time when we left? You guys were not here.
We were.
Did you watch the video, the recording?
No.
Okay. What were we doing when we quit?
We retrieved we were getting some errors, so we weren't able to retrieve some values properly.
So, we implemented the functionality to save the information about the game and then retrieve it. And in our list, it was not coming up. That's where we were, right? So, I'm going to. So why don't you run your app and see what it shows? And then we'll try to debug it. It's a good lesson in some investigative work. So for Harry and Sandeep, what we did was, last time we finished the logic to save the game. So when a game has finished playing, we save it. And we save it as what is called preferences. And then the idea is that when you look at the list of games, it should show you what were the past games. So that's where we left, but where we were was that we were able to save the games, but in the retrieval it was not showing, it was showing a blank list. So so there is a problem. So for debugging, or just to test what was going on, what we have done is, see, this is where the data for the games comes from, past game list content. So this is our logic to load past game data. We first load the number of games that have been played. And this here said 1 to count. And then it was showing an empty list. So just for testing, we changed it to 3 to see if it shows something. And the default behavior is that if any of these things is empty, add item, it will show an error. So this is what it shows. It shows error, right? It shows everywhere, and it shows 3 of them, which means that something is wrong. Our count is coming out as 0, right? So I'm going to put a breakpoint here and we'll watch the value of this count. Let's run it again. And so that's because of the way we have programmed it. We have given the default value as error if the data is not being retrieved. So yes, so it's not there. So it's not able to find the information we are saving. So what we need to do is 2 things. One, there could be a problem in where we are saving the information. We're not saving it right. So how can it retrieve it? Second, there is a problem in retrieval. So we'll put breakpoints in both the places. So this is where we are retrieving it, and we are saving it in the model. There is a function we created, this save game. So we'll put a breakpoint here as well. And we'll run it again with the breakpoints. So what will happen now is that it is going to go and stop in those places. So it has come to this breakpoint. So to create a breakpoint, and you can follow along, this is good experience. If you do it on your machines, just to create a breakpoint between this next to the line number, if you click there, it will create a red dot. That is how you create a breakpoint. And to run it in the debug mode, instead of hitting this play, you hit this bug icon, which is basically to debug. So it has come here, and we want to see what the value of this count is. If I hover my mouse over it, it shows me that the value is 0, right? So there is a problem. It's coming out as 0. Now go ahead and play a game, and if you have a breakpoint there at where it is saving, you'll be able to see whether the count is getting incremented or not, right? So to continue running, you just hit this play pause button and it will keep on running. So I'm here at this screen. I'll play a game, and when it finishes, it is going to stop. So it has come here and stopped in the save game function. So right now it is on this line. This line has not executed yet. So we'll step over it. So these are the buttons you use in the debugging mode. This is to step over a line, meaning execute that line and go to the next. The one next to it is to go inside. So if it is a function call, it will go inside and you can go and debug, look at what is happening in that function. In this case, we are not interested in debugging. These are system functions. So we're not interested in going in. So we'll just step over and then see what the value of num games played is. It's 3. It's already got 3 games saved. Right. So we step over and then we go inside. Oops. So it has supposedly saved the game. I'm going to continue running. Okay. So this tells us that the game is being saved, but when it comes to retrieving, there is a problem. So the game is played, it is saved. Now, what could be the problems? In this case, we know it is being saved, but when it comes to reading, it's not reading. So one possibility is that we are saving it in one place and reading it from another. That it is not communicating the proper location. And for that, let's run it again, and this time we will look at in more detail what is going on. So I've terminated the app and it's running again. So now we've got it back here. Count is still 0. Let's see what this shared prefs looks like. Okay. So this is what is being used to save. And in here, if you examine it, you will see that there is a variable called file. This is actually the location where it saves. So it is, or it is reading from. Right now it is reading. So it's reading from a file called mainActivity.xml. Okay, let's run it. We'll play another game and save it and then see where it is saving it. Okay, so this game just got finished. And this is now in save game, we have a variable by the same name. It could have had a different name. Let's examine this. What is the file name here? Gameboard.xml. So what happens is that this shared preferences, the way it works is it is tied to an activity. So this shared preferences here is being passed to this save game function from gameboard, get preferences. And then what happens is it gets that file name. On the other hand, this one here, load past game data, this shared preferences is coming from the main activity. So it is looking at a different file. So what we need to do is we need to make it consistent. We need to have it look at the same file.
So why this one is looking for the
So see, what is happening is this load past game data, right? It is being called from, if you search, it is being called from, actually from the fragment, right? In the fragment, when the fragment is loaded on create view, I should correct this typo, shared prefs. So we retrieve it from the activity, and this fragment is part of the main activity. That's the first screen. So it is coming from there, right? So that is our problem. It is being saved in one place and being retrieved from another. So we have to make those two identical. And this happened because we used what is called get shared preferences instead of using the default preferences. No, my mistake. Get preferences ties it to the activity. There is another function which is called get shared preferences, and let's look at the documentation for that. Okay, so what this does is shared preferences. Where is Android documentation? Okay, I'm trying to get documentation for Android. Get shared preferences. We used get preferences. Use this from an activity. If you need to use one shared preference file per activity. On the other hand, shared preferences if you need multiple identified by name. So this is what we need to use because we are passing information between different activities. So here what this function does is this function allows us to pass a file name in which it will save the data. So we'll provide it the file name, and then while reading, we'll read the same file. So this is for some reason very slow. Get shared preferences. This one. So string name and mode. So mode we already have in our function call, that is a private file. What we need to do is we need to change the function call and use the name. So that's what we'll do. We'll make this get shared preferences. And here, see, it's already going to complain because this is not the function definition. It needs a string. So let's give it a name. We'll call it game data. So this way it is going to be looking for data. Right now we are in the place where it is going to read the information. So we made this change there, and we'll make the same change in the game model, actually in game board, because that's where this argument is being passed from. So instead of get preferences, we'll again go with get shared preferences and same file name. Okay. So let's run it now. So it has come and stopped here where we have the breakpoint. Let's look at the value of count. Should be 0 because that's a new file. We've just given it a new file. Let's see if it is using that file here. So it is going to be looking for data in this file. Let's run it and see what happens. I still expect to see 3 items, all errors, because I've given a different name. Did I? Okay, then that's a mistake. So here we will see application is running. So game data and game model, that's okay. That's a mistake then. That's a bug. So here we examine, it will be a different name, game model. My mistake. Good catch. Let's fix it. We'll go back to the game board, and we'll call it game data, and we'll run it again. So these kind of things happen when you're working on a larger app, and it's important to be aware of how to diagnose these problems, where to go deeper, drill down basically, keep looking until you are able to diagnose it. So again, it came and it stopped there. Let's just make sure game data, and this thing should be 0 right now. So let's run it. It has come here. It is, no, it hasn't. I have to play the game for it to go to where it is going to save. Okay, so it has come to save the game. Now shared prefs object should have the same name. So we'll go over this, and then it should go inside. Okay, no, because I went over. Hello. So it is done, it has saved. Okay. Now the way things are right now, if I go back, it does not refresh my list. And that is going to be a part of what you will do as an assignment, how to make that list refresh when the back button is pressed. So I'm just going to run the app again so that it goes and stops there where we are reading the information, and we'll examine what the count came out as this time. So the count came out as 1, meaning 1 game is saved. But we have this 1, 2, 3. So anyway, it is going to read all of them, and it should show me 1 actual game and 2 errors. So it is showing me 1 actual game, a timestamp, and who won the game, and 2 errors because we are forcing it to read 3 instead of going up to count. So let's fix that bit. We'll change this to the variable count. Okay. So this way we will be at a point where we can play the games, they will get saved. So let's run it here. And now it is showing me just 1 game. I'll play the game. It has come to save it. This time the number of games played, when it is retrieved, it should be 1. So we want it to increment to 2. So now when I step over, this should have become 2. Its value is 2, right? And it is going to execute all of this. It is going to save the new number of games, game result, date, time, etc. And apply the changes, save them to the file. So it's done. Now when I run the app again, it should show me two games there. So the count now is 2. In all the games it will retrieve. and it's showing me 2 games. Okay, how many of you are following along and doing this? Show of hands. So try this and see if you're getting to this point where the games are saving and you are able to see the list getting changed when you run the app again. So here is a question for those of you who are not following along. Find out how to change the text that is displayed in the list. The game. So Shahrukh noted that when it's a draw, it doesn't show anything here where it says who won the game. And when there is a win, it just says X or O. It does not say that X actually won the game. So where do you make that change? Couple of minutes. Find out where that is happening in the code. Find out and then tell us how you got there. Found it? Good. So how did you find it?
So in an online view folder inside the passing list beside the viewer after, we have that's where we're assigning the values folder.m id view with and text. So inside that I added if statement that if it's equal to x or o, then stays on unless drop.
Perfect. So that's the right place in this file, past game list recycle view adapter. So the way this works is you have an activity which is basically what you see on the screen. And in the activity we have put a list fragment. So the list fragment is contained in this activity. And the list fragment has what is called a list adapter. The job of the list adapter is to manage the list, to know how many items are there and what to display and all of that. And that it does through a list that it holds as a variable. So which is what is happening here. This is our adapter class. It has a list of all the past games, and in this onBind view holder, this function is called when this fragment is displayed in the activity. So it is this function's job to tell what is going to be displayed in what element of each row of the list. And what we have done is, if you go and look at our resources in layout, we have something called this, right? What is in this? This is what we display in each row. We have a game emoji we haven't added, but we have the other things. And well, maybe we are not even using it right now, that part. But what it is doing is it's got 3 items, all text. The ID view, which shows the game number sort of. That is what our list is displaying right now. It just says game 1, game 2, etc. And this is where it says who won the game and the timestamp. So this is where you intervene. You check if somebody won the game or not, if it is X or O. If not, you display a draw, which is what Shahrukh said. You add an if statement here. This is what we'll do. If equals okay, if it equals any of those, what you want is, you want to say somebody won the game. So we'll say add this string here. Else we want this oops, sorry, I'm used to Mac key commands and I keep messing it up. So this will repeat. And instead of this, we'll just say draw. So this way it will recognize those two things. So now if you run your game, you should be able to save things. When you restart the app, you will be able to see who won the game and whether it was a draw, and a date and timestamp should appear. So I can see that change here. It shows me who won the game. It says 1. And if I let a game go to a draw, okay, it's a draw. It should show up as a draw. It does. Okay. What is our everybody who is up to this point, more or less? Okay, so far we've got a list view that shows the list of games. It allows us to play a new game. It saves the data. It puts that game into the list and displays it next time we run the app. What we are missing in terms of functionality so we are able to do this now. The display up to this point. It shows us what games have been played, but what about displaying? What happens if you touch something in this list? Try that, see what happens. It crashes, right? Why does it crash? So let's read the error messages. We'll run it again, we'll make it crash, and we'll watch what is happening here to find out why it is crashing. Okay, so there it is. So I clicked on it, it crashed, and it gave us this message here. So start at the bottom until you see a file names in blue. Those are files you have created. So this is what is happening, and the error message is an operation is not implemented. Not implemented. That is our error message. And how do we know what is not implemented? We click on this, on list fragment interaction. This is going here. If I click here, it says to do, reason not implemented. That's why it's crashing, because we've left it as a to do. This code came to us when we added the list fragment to the main activity. It was generated by Android Studio for us, that this is something you need to implement later on. So what do we need to do here now? Now that when we touch a past game, what do we want to happen? Exactly. Go to the game board and show the moves played. So right now, how do we get to the game board when we want to view the game board? What do we touch? The play button, right? The floating action button. So that code is already there. How to launch the game board? It is here in floating action button dots on click listener. The way we do it, and we talked about it before, is we create an intention to launch a new activity called game board, and then start it. Basically create the intent and then start. So this is exactly what we need to do over there as well, where it says to do. So comment that code out so it stops crashing and copy these two lines up there. So what it will do is it will launch the game board. Okay. What does it do? Does it launch the game board blank or does it show you what you want to see? The previous game. So this is the kind of logic. Let's say if you were, instead of a list of games, you had a list of emails. Same thing. You have a compose button which opens a new email that you can write. But if you want to view an older email, you have to follow the exact same logic. Where is it going? What do I need to do? I need to display an email, but this time instead of allowing the user to type, I just want to display. So that is what we want here. So right now it is going to launch a game board when I run it, but it's blank. It's not that game. Now, do you remember when we talked about these intents? We talked about a mechanism to pass data. So before we start this activity, we can tell this intent, this intention, we can load it with information. You can say, okay, start a game, but it's not a new game. It's an old game, and these are the moves. So now when that game board comes up, it will check, oh, is it a new game or a past game? If it is a past game, the game board will say, okay, now I have to just play these moves one by one. That's the logic. So intent. Let's find the intent class and see what we can do to pass that information. Okay, so this is the intent class, and you can read this documentation, intent structure, and if you keep browsing, you will find here something called extras. This is a bundle of any additional information. This can be used to provide extended information to the component. For example, we have, they're using the same example. We have an action to send an email message. We could also include extra pieces of data here to supply a subject, body, etc. Okay. So this is what we want to do. We want to provide extra information. And I wonder if they have examples here. Okay, so we've gotten into the details of the documentation. But the way it does is extra, right? We know that it's called extras. So it has a function called put extra. So that's what we need to do. We need to tell it that it has extra information. And here, see, we know the item, meaning the game data. What does this item contain? This contains whatever we defined here in past game. Who won the game, timestamp, and order of moves. All of this, as the item is of this type, will go here. So from here, I completely lost my, it's in main. See, main activity has, it implements this on list fragment interaction listener, which means whatever is happening on the list fragment, if you touch, any actions will come here. And this is where we are launching the blank game board, and now we need to tell it. So we'll say intent dot put extra, some extra information that will go to the next activity, which is this game board. So we can put an extra, you need to, this is like key value. So we give it a key. Let's give it a, no, before we do that, I would like to use constants. So we'll go to the place where we have defined our constants. I think it's in the game model here. So we'll define a constant. In game model, if you scroll to the bottom, instead of using raw strings in our code, we'll define a constant. And another one, no, actually we don't need this. We already have that order of moves. That is what we'll be passing. It is already a constant. So this is what we'll use. So from the main activity, now we'll use this constant as a key and assign the value, whether it's a passed game or not, true, false. You following? So go to the main activity, and now constants dot is passed game. Okay, and you will see that it will put the entire class. It will give the entire path to the class, which is fine, and we'll assign it a value of true. Don't type the word value. Whatever comes up in gray like this in Android Studio, just a reminder that it's a label that Android Studio put it there. I did not type it. If you type it, you'll get errors. You will see in Xcode also this happens. So, okay, so we are telling it's a passed game. Let's also, because it's a passed game, we will provide it the order of moves. So it needs to know. So what is our order of moves? Item dot order of moves. There it is. Okay. What is this error? That little red line. What does it say? Optionals. So what has happened is this here, see, question mark. It's an optional, it's a nullable. In Kotlin, you will use the word nullable, meaning it can be null. So we know that whenever the execution comes here, this is not going to be null. So we need to, tell that to the compiler, and here you'll use double exclamation. In Swift, you would call it an optional and use a single exclamation. So what this does is it gets rid of that error message, and now it is sending this information when it launches this activity, start activity. When it does this, it goes with this information that, okay, it's a passed game and these are the moves. So do we need to pass, for example, who won the game? We need to pass who won the game? Or do you think it will be able to tell as it plays the moves? So when we are saving, we save all the moves, right? So if this was our game board, we have numbering 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what we do is we record where the moves happen, the sequence. And we save the game only when it is finished. Either somebody won or it's a draw. So if we have the sequence, we can just let the game logic do the job of determining who won the game. Oh, yes. So it will keep on playing, and it will, just like it did the first time when the people played the game. So we won't pass it who won the game. We'll just let it work it out as it reproduces the game. Now this, see, we are launching a game board activity. So let's go to the game board, and in the game board on create is where we can retrieve, see, this saved instance, this bundle is where information is coming out, whatever was passed. In fact, every activity has a variable called intent that it inherits from its parent class. So that's what we'll use. So let's say actually this is useful for us. Instead of making it a local variable, we could have it as a class variable and assign it to false, and then we check if intent dot extra. So we need to retrieve the value of the extra. Okay, so these are all the functions available to us to retrieve extras, if it's a boolean, if it's a string, whatever it may be, right? So in this case we saved it as a boolean. See, when we saved it, let's go to where we saved it, main activity. We put the extra as a boolean value, true. So we'll retrieve it as a boolean value. Get boolean extra. And what is the name? Constants dot is past game, right? And this is not finished. It wants us to give another parameter, which is the default value. So we'll say default is false. Okay, so if this is true, then we need to assign, we need to save, we need to retrieve the game moves that we passed along with the intent. So how are we going to save that? We'll create another variable, again make it a global, call it past game moves, and it's a string, so we'll initialize it to an empty string. And in this case, if it is a past game, we'll do this, past game moves equal to intent dot get string extra constants dot order of moves, right? In this case, it does not want a default value. So this get string extra did not complain because it assumes that the default value is an empty string. In case of a boolean, it wants a specific. Okay, so what do we want to do? What else do we want to do here? See, we are setting the title to new game, but this is only if it is a new game. So let's put this into an else. And when it is a past game, we'll set the title to past game. Title is what shows up at the top on the screen. Let's run it and see what happens now. So there we are. It is showing the list of touch one of the games. It is still blank because we haven't done any coding to use that order of move. But at the top it says past game. So it is doing a part of what we want already. Now our job is to get those moves, whatever sequence we got. Let's say the game was played like this. So 5, 1, 2, and then let's just make it easier on us not to have too many numbers. Then 9, and the X plays here, and it's over. So this is, let's say, the sequence of moves. Now we want to play these moves. When the game board is shown, right now it is blank. Instead of blank, we want to say, okay, programmatically play all these moves one by one. Where does that happen? In the activity.
Game model.
Oops. What would you like to see?
The constants. So is pass game saved as a script?
So this is just a constant, the key. It's just a key. It doesn't matter what it's called. It's just a key, to sort of to pass the intent. So instead of, we could have typed this string order of moves in double quotes here. But then, we run into all those issues about if the P is capital somewhere and not somewhere else. So to avoid all of that, we can use these constants. You have another option in Android, in the resources. There are values called strings. So instead of using your own constants class, you could use the r dot string dot whatever, So whatever works, it's equivalent. So now what we want to do is, you see, your activity is being displayed. Activity life cycle in Android. So activities have a life cycle. They come into being, they're displayed, they can be put in a dormant state if you switch to another app, or they can be killed altogether. And this is how all of this happens. Is it big enough for you to read the text? Oh, it won't let me. Anyway, so activity launched. On create is where we retrieve the intent. So this is our game board activity. So in the on create function, we do deal with whatever parameters were passed. And then there is on start, on resume, and this is when the activity is running. And then it can be paused, it can be stopped, or it can be destroyed. So pause is when it is no longer visible. Let's say you move to the next activity, or you switched apps or whatever. And this on destroy is when your app is either the app is stopped, or the system needs more memory, and it will say, okay, your previous activities that are on pause right now or that are stopped, we can just destroy that. So when you go back, it will recreate it. It will go through this life cycle. So on create, at this point, the activity is not visible. So if we were to, let's try that. You will see what happens. So this is where we are, right? How do we play the game? This function gets called square touched. Whenever you are actually touching on the game board, it makes a function call. And it calls this function square touched. If we call this function from here, let's say, we don't know about the life cycle and all that. We say, okay, now we know it's the past game. So we set the title to past game, and let's play all the moves from here. Easy, right? It should do the job. So let's just pretend that we want to play only one move from there. Just to show you that it's going to be a problem, let's say find view by ID. Button 1 is the first square, right? And then we call a square touched on this. I've just hard coded this. I'm making it programmatically put, make it touch the first square. Let's see what happens. Okay, it shows the list. I touch. Oh, it actually worked. It worked. I was expecting it to crash. I don't know if it is random or it will always do that. So at on create okay, so let's put it here and we'll see what happens. So what we'll do is, this past games is a string. It's a text string that looks like this. We want to split it into integers and just keep calling this square touched for each one of those. Right? That's what we'll do. So how do we split it? Is there a function called split? Turns out there is a function called split in Kotlin for strings. So we'll say split. Split using what? Using a comma. Now this split function, Kotlin string split. So this is the documentation. Splits this character sequence to a list of strings. That's exactly what we want, right? So this is what it is going to do. Now we'll iterate over this. In Kotlin you have a for syntax that looks like this. We have used it before. For each item, we're just calling it I because we know that it's a number in the list, do something. What do we want it to do? We want it to retrieve that particular button. So if the first number is 5, we want button 5. Then we want button 1. Then we want button 2. So it's Swift creeping into Kotlin. Value, what do we, let's call it button number equal to button plus I. Right? So for the first one, it will become 5, 1, and so on. And now, actually, we have this code that we had. We'll just put it inside the for. What does it do? It gets a button number, and this is our problem. We cannot. How do we get this? So I know that it's called button 5, button 6, button 1, button 2. But this find view by ID wants a resource ID. It's not a string. We need to make a function call. We need to, instead of typing r.id dot something we don't know yet, we will say, okay, get me this r value for this ID. We'll pass a variable like that. So there is a, for that, there is a class that, an object that all activities inherit. It's called resources. Get resource. Get resource. No. It is actually get identifier. That's an identifier, r.id. Right? So we're trying to get an identifier. We're not getting a resource. So identifier by name. What is the name? The name is button number. That's it. And it says that, see, there is a second argument called package. So resources are allocated according to packages. We are not looking at any different package but the current package, whatever it may be. So this dot package name. So within this package, get me a resource, get me an ID, the r.id object, which is identified by this string. Are you also getting this error? You are? Resources dot get identifier button number. Its name. No value passed for traveler. This is, as far as I can tell, this is the right. Get identifier. So the resources object has a method called get identifier. So we'll go to the documentation. We'll understand why that error is coming. Get identifier. Okay. I see. There is a problem. It needs 3 arguments. We have given only 2. Okay. So the name and the default type and the default package. We gave the package, we are missing the default type. Optional default resource type to find. So what we are looking for is def type. It does not describe here. First 2 components def type. Okay. Now the types of resources. What we have is, what we are looking for is an ID here. If we were looking for a different type of resource instead of an ID. So what we are saying is that this thing here, this object will return something of type r.id, which is what we had before, right? We had something like find view by ID, and we said r.id dot like this. So we know that this, whatever resource, this identifier, it's going to return an identifier, not a resource. That itself is of type ID, r.id. Could be r.value. You could be retrieving a value and then accessing it. So in this case, we need to just pass the default type as ID and the package name. And this will do the job for us. It will retrieve the buttons one by one and play call the square touched. Let's see, moment of truth, what it does. Okay, so this is the game. I'm going to just touch the middle game. It crashed, which is what I was expecting the first time. That it should crash because the activity is not visible. How can it call this? So that's a matter of timing. There is no guarantee that this would work. Because see, we are still in on create. The activity is being created right now. It has not been displayed. How can you call a touch event without it being having displayed? So let's go here. See, in the error log, illegal state exception button must not be null. Where? Here. Okay, no, I take back what I just said. I think we need to investigate what our string is. Let's put a breakpoint. Let's put a breakpoint here and see what is going on. So this breakpoint was where we put it to keep track of what is being saved and not. So I'm going to remove that. We don't need that anymore. So it won't stop next time we debug. So this is our game. I'm going to touch that, and now it has come here, right? It has come to the place where it is reconstructing all the moves. What is this variable? It's a bit different from there, but doesn't matter. 1, 2, 5, 6, 9, and there is a comma at the end. So in that list, when it splits by using comma as a delimiter, it puts another. So yes, so at the end it has 1, 2, 5, 6, 9, and then an empty string. You will see what happens. Let's just play this. For I in moves, right? So what is the value of I? It will keep showing you here. Size is 6, I is 1. Let's just put a breakpoint here. Then I is 2, then I is 5, then 6, then 9, and okay. I think I'm causing it to I is null. It's empty. That's what is causing it to crash. So we need to program an exception that unless I has a length greater than 0, don't do all this. Let's do that here, because eventually we are going to need it.
So where is this empty?
Sorry, this what?
This empty, like right now the I doesn't have any value.
So it's because, see, these past games is 1, 2, 5, 6, 9, and then a comma.
Oh, the comma means
at the end.
We have another one after the.
Exactly. So what it's doing is it splits by the comma, and it sees the comma, and then it says you have another one which is empty, which has nothing in it. That's where it's coming from. So we have choices. We could get rid of the comma. We could truncate it by 1. There are many different ways of doing it, right? So instead of it crashing, we could say if I dot length is greater than 0, then do all of this. Otherwise, don't do any of this. So this way, it is going to respect that. It's not going to look for a button that doesn't exist and then try to pass it to square touched, and then it will crash saying that this cannot be null. That's what was happening here. Okay. Now I'm going to run it without the debug, and we'll see what happens. It's working. And it just shows everything all at once. Oh. Okay. Okay. So it does that. But right. Good. So far, so good. So we've got it to a point where it is showing us all the moves. Now, what do we want? If we want to display the sequence in which they were played, right? Instead of, here we are playing them one by one, but it's so fast within the for loop that it appears all of a sudden. So if we could introduce a delay here, we could just, over here, after each, well, before each move, let's say, I don't know if delay is accessible here. Kotlin has a function called delay. Okay. So now what we'll do is this square touched call with a delay. Let's say a delay of half a second. So every half a second it will play one move. So how do you do delayed execution in some other language which you're familiar with?
They have a set timeout.
Set timeout, right?
Yeah, you can have the callback function and the tab you want to do.
Exactly. So you'll say set timeout, a callback function, show something, hide something, move something, whatever it is, and the delay. So this sort of mechanism is there in all the languages. So that is something that can be done. And how would you go about finding out how to do it in Kotlin? You know how to do it in JavaScript. How would you look for it? What would you search? How to call a function after delay in Kotlin. That's a very good guess. So this page has probably lots of answers. So you will get lots of choices and lots of opinions of different people. Don't do this, do this. So somebody here says you can use schedule and you can use this kind of, the code is here. We could pick this up. There is also an option to use handler post delayed. I like that this is the most concise. This is like set timeout. It does not require you to do setup, create a different objects and all. So let's use this. We'll just call this handler.post delayed. And this is the callback function. This is the function. This is what it will do after 1000 milliseconds. So, and what we want to do is we want to do this inside that, right? So it was handler dot. Okay, first let's import this. So alt enter, it will import this handler android.os post delayed and this, right? This is what it wants, and the delay. Let's say 500 milliseconds. And this square touched will move it inside the handler, this callback function here. So after 500 milliseconds, it will call this. Okay, let's make it more interesting. I want 1 second. So try that. What happens if you do this? When you run it like this, what does it do? We're almost there. This is what we set out to do when we started this entire tic-tac-toe thing. Does it show one by one?
No. So it waits for 1 second and then
It shows everything, right? It waits for 1 second, it shows everything because that's what we are telling it to do. all the iterations in the for loop are being delayed by exactly 1 second. That's not what we want. We want the first one to be shown immediately, or let's say a delay of half a second, then another half a second, then another half a second. So we need to multiply it here by the move number. So we can just count that. And in here we'll say, and we'll multiply this 1000. I'm going to make it 1000 is too long. Let's make it 500 times count. Okay, good.
What if we just delay the phone loop and just run the for loop after every 1 second?
No, if we delay the, where do you mean, in here?
Yeah, then half of
Then it will do the entire for loop after that much delay, and the effect will be the same as what you saw. What we're trying to do is delay each iteration by an incremental time. So first half a second, the second one after, we know all of the moves right now. We're just telling it half a second from now, play this first move, 1 second, play the second move, 1.5 seconds, like that. So this is giving us an error. Let's see what it is. Type mismatch, required long, found int. Why do you think this error came? Expected, required long, and found int. Yeah. Why does it require a long? Why doesn't it just work with an int?
Right now we're setting the time.
See, numbers are small here, right? 500. This can be done with an integer. Why has it been given a type of long? Milliseconds. It could be the integer would not be able to hold it. So all we have to do is over here, we set its type to long. Then the error will go away. And now when you run your app, you should see the moves being executed one by one. What happens, Sandeep? Doesn't? What does it do? Have you got count plus plus? So once you increment the count, it will be okay. It's doing it, right? Okay. Good. So at this point, if you've got this much code in there, your app should display. You will see that I haven't played so many games, but my list has gotten pretty long. So there are problems with this right now. Play a game, it will do the animation. Right? It's doing one by one. Can you guys see it from there? So this is what we set out to do. We've gotten to a point where we've got most of the things in. I want to switch back to our presentation, and we'll wrap this up and then take a break, and then we'll start a new app. So I want to show you. So when we started this, we said that this was going to be an assignment. This would turn into an assignment. So there are additional tasks that you have to do. So now we are able to display past games. There are things though. Okay, yeah, this is what we just did. Create intent and past data, initialize the game view, show the moves. We just finished this. So one of the things that is happening right now is whenever you replay a game, it saves it again. It saves the game again. Because our programming is to save the game whenever it finishes, regardless of whether it's a new game or a past game. So it just saves. Every time it keeps saving additional copies of it. Right? Okay. So it's not see you next time, it is see you after 20 minutes. And we will start a new app. It's currency conversion. We'll make an API call to a public API and get exchange rates and display them. That's probably going to take us one full class, so we might do half of it today and half of it next time. Okay, so it's 127, 126. Let's start at 145.